The desert was the kind of place where time seemed to hold its breath. Heat shimmered above the dunes, the wind shifting sand as it had for thousands of years, erasing and revealing the past in the same slow motion. The archaeological team had been working for weeks without much to show for it. Fragments of clay pots, worn beads, and tools typical of the region's Bronze Age layers. Nothing unusual, nothing headline worthy. That morning was no different, at least at first. A junior digger, crouched in a shallow trench, struck something solid with the tip of his trowel. The sound was wrong for pottery, sharper, almost metallic. At first he assumed it was a modern intrusion, perhaps a piece of scrap buried by the wind. But when the sand was brushed away, what emerged was small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, and unlike anything the team had cataloged before. The object glinted faintly beneath the desert sun, its surface too smooth, too precise, to belong to the rough craftsmanship of the era they were excavating. It wasn't just metal, it felt impossibly light, yet solid, as though forged from something that defied the known abilities of the ancient world. The edges bore patterns so intricate they almost seemed to move under the shifting light, like symbols caught between geometry and art. When the artifact was passed to the site's lead archaeologist, a frown replaced his usual professional calm. It wasn't recognition, it was the opposite. There was nothing in his decades of study that could place this object in the region's history. He said little, just ordered it to be photographed, bagged, and kept out of casual view. The others could sense it immediately. Something about this find was different. And in that moment, in the middle of a forgotten desert, the team realized they might have just pulled from the earth a question too big for easy answers. A question that could, if proven real, unravel everything we thought we knew about the rise of civilization. Back at the camp's makeshift lab, the artifact drew every eye in the tent. Under the harsh glow of a desk lamp, its details became sharper. The metallic sheen was uniform without the pitting or corrosion expected from centuries underground. A quick magnet test failed to attract it, yet the density readings hinted at a composition stronger than steel. Whatever alloy it was made from, it didn't belong to the Bronze Age, or any age known in the region's metallurgical history. The engravings were no less baffling. Under magnification, they revealed patterns so precise they could have been etched by modern laser tools. Yet their geometry didn't match any recorded script. They were neither purely decorative nor clearly functional, as though serving a purpose we could no longer guess. The lead archaeologist, a man not prone to superstition, seemed visibly unsettled. He called in his senior staff, speaking in clipped sentences, eyes flicking toward the camp workers, as though strangers might be listening. The instructions were clear: no photographs outside official documentation, no discussion with press contacts, and no mention in the team's daily updates. To the younger members, the reaction felt excessive. Finds like this were supposed to be celebrated, not hidden. But to the veterans, the silence made sense. Artifacts that broke the timeline rarely made it into textbooks. They vanished into private collections, locked archives, or worse, discredited and forgotten. It wasn't fear of the object itself. It was fear of what the truth about it might unleash. 2 days after the discovery, the desert silence was broken by the arrival of vehicles no one recognized. They weren't the battered jeeps and supply trucks the team was used to, but dark, dust-coated SUVs that seemed out of place against the endless sand. From them stepped men in pressed suits and polished shoes, attire wholly unsuited for the heat, but perfectly suited for authority. They didn't bother with greetings. Without introducing themselves, they moved through the camp with quiet efficiency, accompanied by 2 uniformed guards who kept their eyes fixed on the team. One of the suited men carried a slim black briefcase, another a high-resolution camera. They photographed the artifact from every angle, then began collecting the team's notes, sketches, and initial metallurgical readings. No explanations were offered, only vague reassurances that the find was of national interest and would be handled appropriately. The lead archaeologist tried to keep his composure, but his clenched jaw told a different story. Within hours, certain documents vanished from the work tables, and the artifact itself was removed from the tent without ceremony. That night, around the campfire, conversation was hushed. The junior members whispered theories, government seizure, corporate intervention, perhaps even military involvement. The veterans didn't speak much at all. They had seen versions of this before in other digs and other forgotten corners of the world. It was the unspoken consensus that unsettled everyone most. Whatever this artifact was, it was no longer theirs to study, and maybe no longer meant for the world to see. Even in the brief hours before it was taken, the artifact had imprinted itself in the minds of everyone who had handled it. About the size of a closed fist, it fit perfectly in the palm, as though designed to be held. Its contours were neither purely geometric nor entirely organic, a strange balance of flowing curves and razor-sharp edges. The surface was smooth to the touch, yet the light revealed a subtle texture like ripples frozen in metal. Up close, the engravings were the most hypnotic feature. They were impossibly fine, so fine, in fact, that under a digital microscope they appeared as interlocking channels, barely a hair's breadth across. To the naked eye, they resembled a language, but no linguist on site could connect them to any known script, ancient or modern. They avoided familiar patterns, no repeated glyphs, no obvious sentence structure, yet there was intention in their placement, as if each mark had been positioned according to a logic just out of reach. The metallurgical tests deepened the mystery. Samples taken from microscopic shavings showed a composite of metals that, by all current understanding, could not have been smelted together with ancient techniques. Titanium traces were present, an element only isolated in the late 18th century, fused with a copper-gold alloy in a bond no known process could achieve without industrial heat and pressure. Even stranger, the crystalline structure suggested a forging temperature beyond anything achievable before the modern era. If these readings were accurate, it meant one of two things. Either the artifact was an impossibly advanced modern forgery planted in ancient soil, or someone, thousands of years ago, had mastered a technology we've only just begun to approach. And if it was the latter, history itself might be built on the wrong foundation. In the cramped lab tent, comparisons began immediately. The archaeologists brought out reference images of known relics from across the ancient world, intricate ceremonial daggers, astrolabes from the Islamic Golden Age, even the famed Antikythera mechanism. Yet side by side, the differences were glaring. Where ancient artifacts showed the imperfections of handcraft, this object displayed a precision bordering on the mechanical. Its symmetry was exact, its proportions flawless, as though designed using tools that simply did not exist in the era it was supposedly made. Some suggested it could have been a ceremonial piece, perhaps an offering to the gods. But ceremonial objects tended to be ornamental. They carried meaning through decoration, not through function. This artifact's engravings felt purposeful, more like circuits than symbols, their lines connecting in ways that hinted at energy flow or mechanical interaction. Others proposed it might be navigational, an ancient mariner's tool, but there were no moving parts, no magnetic core, and no astronomical references consistent with known devices. The more they compared, the clearer the divide became. This wasn't an artistic flourish on metal. It was the product of design, a design meant to do something. The problem was, no one could determine what that something was. And in that gap between theory and certainty, the unease grew. If the artifact was built to serve a function, then whoever made it not only understood metallurgy far beyond their time, they also had a purpose we could no longer comprehend. When the private lab results arrived, they were delivered in a plain envelope without a return address. The summary was brief, clinical, and unsettling. Based on composition, manufacturing precision, and degradation patterns, the artifact did not align with any known human technological timeline. No known culture, ancient or modern, could be definitively credited with its creation. For the scientists, this wasn't just a gap in the record, it was a chasm. If the findings were correct, the object was either an impossibly sophisticated forgery planted with deliberate intent, or evidence of a civilization entirely absent from our historical narrative. The lead archaeologist read the report twice before folding it away in silence. Around the table, no one spoke the obvious thought aloud that perhaps human history wasn't merely incomplete, but fundamentally flawed. And if that was true, then what else, buried beneath our feet, had been quietly erased from the story of our past? In the brief window before the artifact disappeared into official custody, high-resolution scans were made of its surface. It was during the analysis of these images that one detail began to stand out. Certain clusters of engravings bore a strange familiarity. At first glance, they seemed like abstract patterns, but when overlaid on astronomical charts, the resemblance was undeniable. They mirrored constellations, but there was a problem. The constellations weren't positioned as they appear today. Instead, they matched the night sky as it would have been thousands of years ago, far earlier than the birth of recorded astronomy in any known culture. The precision was astounding. Even the subtle shifts caused by the slow wobble of Earth's axis, known as precession, were accounted for. Whoever etched these patterns had charted the heavens with an accuracy modern astronomers only achieved in the last few centuries. For scholars, this raised a deeply unsettling question. How could a people with no telescopes, no recorded mathematics of orbital motion, and no evidence of advanced seafaring possess such knowledge? The data implied years, even generations of meticulous observation and a level of technical understanding that should have been impossible. If these engravings were intentional star maps, they hinted at something extraordinary. Either an unrecorded civilization had mastered astronomy long before the accepted timeline, or the knowledge had been passed down from an even older source, one that had vanished, leaving only whispers etched into an object buried beneath the desert sands. The strange star engravings brought to mind another historical anomaly, the Piri race map of 1513. Drawn by an Ottoman admiral, it famously depicted coastlines of South America with uncanny precision, and more controversially, an outline resembling the ice-free shores of Antarctica. This was centuries before Antarctica's recorded discovery and millennia before modern technology could map beneath its ice. Historians have long debated how such a map could exist. Some argue it was a compilation of older, now lost charts passed down through civilizations. Others claim it's a misunderstood coincidence. Yet, when the artifact's engravings were compared to the sky as it appeared in deep antiquity, the parallel was hard to ignore. Both seemed to preserve knowledge far too advanced for their time, as if they were fragments of a cartographic tradition that stretched back into prehistory. If the Piri race map was the Earth's forgotten geography, this artifact might be its counterpart in the heavens, a celestial record kept alive through means we no longer understand. and together they hinted at a possibility scholars feared to voice, that there were map makers in the deep past whose reach extended far beyond the limits of the civilizations we know. If the artifact truly carried the memory of the ancient sky, then it might also carry the memory of a people erased from history. Civilizations like Egypt, Sumer, and the Indus Valley are hailed as humanity's first great cultures, yet their emergence was sudden, as if inheriting knowledge from an unseen predecessor. The artifact's precision, its metallurgy, and its astronomical engravings all whispered of such a predecessor. A culture with reach across continents, capable of mapping both earth and sky with impossible skill. No ruins bear its name, no records tell its story. If it existed, time and disaster have swept almost every trace away. This single object, pulled from beneath the sands, could be its last surviving witness. And if that's true, then the accepted history of human civilization is not just incomplete, it is a palimpsest, written over the faint, fading script of a forgotten world. When the first reports were quietly circulated to a handful of universities, the replies came back with remarkable speed. They were polite, measured, and almost identical. While the discovery was intriguing, the reviewers wrote, the evidence was deemed insufficient for formal publication. To an outsider, that might seem like a reasonable academic safeguard, a call for more proof before any bold claims could be made. But to those who had been in this field long enough, the phrase carried a different meaning. It was the academic world's velvet-gloved way of saying, this is too dangerous to touch. Privately, several scholars admitted the artifact's implications were staggering, even troubling. If the data were published, it would ignite debates that could fracture entire disciplines. Ancient metallurgy, anthropology, and astronomy would all need to be reconsidered. Careers built on established timelines might crumble, and with them, the reputations of those who had spent decades defending the current narrative. So instead of open discourse, there was silence, not outright denial, but a refusal to engage. The emails stopped. Calls went unanswered. Conference invitations dried up. For the lead archaeologist, it was a suffocating limbo. The artifact was too extraordinary to ignore, yet too disruptive to acknowledge. In the end, the quiet was more revealing than any argument could be. Silence in academia was rarely about a lack of interest. It was about fear, not of being wrong, but of the world that might emerge if they were proven right. The first sign came in the form of a terse email from the primary sponsor. All further disbursements are suspended pending review. No explanation, no timeline. Within days, secondary funding partners followed suit, citing vague budget reallocations. It was an implosion, the financial lifeblood of the excavation drying up almost overnight. Then came the official notice from the Regional Antiquities Authority. The dig site was to be closed immediately, ostensibly for safety concerns related to unstable ground and seasonal weather risks, but the timing was too precise to ignore. The weather had not changed, and the ground had been stable for months. For the archaeologists, the message was clear. The work was over, at least in any official capacity. Supplies were packed, trenches filled, and years of preparation undone in a matter of days. What puzzled the younger team members most was the logic. Why pull funding from a discovery that could have brought unprecedented prestige? The veterans, however, knew better. Prestige was a double-edged sword. If the artifact's implications ran counter to accepted history, it could destabilize institutions far more powerful than a single university department. And in that calculus, preserving control over the narrative mattered far more than uncovering the truth buried in the sand. It began quietly, a grainy image posted on an obscure archaeology blog. The photo showed a gloved hand holding something metallic, its surface marked with strange curling lines. The details were blurred, perhaps deliberately, but it was enough to ignite curiosity. Within hours, the post had been shared across niche history forums, UFO discussion boards, and conspiracy channels. Theories multiplied at a dizzying pace. Some claimed the object was proof of ancient alien contact. Others insisted it was a device left behind by time travelers. A few dismissed it as a clever hoax, yet even they admitted the craftsmanship was unsettlingly advanced. Officials never acknowledged the leak, but the sudden swell of online chatter ensured one thing. The artifact was no longer a secret confined to dusty reports and locked crates. It had slipped into the public's imagination, and there no authority could fully contain it. Long before the archaeologists arrived with their tools and survey maps, the land had its own keepers of memory, the elders who carried stories passed down through countless generations. Around evening fires, they spoke of the Sky Forge gift, a relic said to have been given by the gods to their distant ancestors. It was not described as a weapon or a treasure, but as something that could speak to the stars and call answers from the dark. The tale was woven with a sense of reverence and caution. The gift, they said, was meant to guide their people, to connect them with forces beyond the earth. But in some versions, the story carried a warning. Those who tried to use it for selfish gain invited disaster, for the gift could open doors that should stay closed. To the locals, these weren't fanciful myths, but fragments of real events, preserved in story because there had been no other way to preserve them. When the archaeologists described the object they had found, the strange metal, the markings, the inexplicable craftsmanship, the elders simply nodded as though hearing confirmation of something they had always known. To the scientists, it was a remarkable coincidence. To the elders, it was proof that the old stories had always been true, and that what lay buried in the sand was not merely a find. It was the return of something sacred. In the days that followed, notes from the artifact's preliminary analysis were compared to the legends. The similarities were unsettling. The elders' description of an object forged in the sky matched the metallurgical findings that pointed to techniques beyond ancient human capability. The idea that it could speak to the stars resonated eerily with the star chart engravings traced on its surface. Even the dimensions aligned. The story spoke of an object no larger than a man's hand, yet holding the weight of distant knowledge. The warnings about misuse echoed the unease that modern researchers felt when confronted with the object's inexplicable purpose. These were not vague, symbolic parallels. They were precise, almost technical, and that raised a question far more troubling than whether the legends were based on truth. If they were, then someone thousands of years ago had witnessed the artifact in its original time and function. Were these merely myths distorted over centuries, or were they the fading testimonies of people who had once seen, held, and perhaps even used this impossible creation? As researchers widened their scope, they discovered the Skyforge gift was not unique to this region's folklore. Across South America, myths told of metal messengers descending from the heavens, bringing knowledge and warning. In Polynesian tradition, there were tales of star voices, artifacts that could call across great distances, meant only for the wise to use. Even in parts of Africa and Asia, scattered legends spoke of sky gifts given to chosen tribes, later lost or hidden when they became too dangerous. The names differed, the settings shifted, but the pattern was unmistakable. Across oceans and continents, separated by vast stretches of time, cultures had carried stories of small, mysterious objects, linking the Earth to the stars. It suggested something staggering. Either these were the coincidental inventions of the human imagination, or they were cultural memories of a shared ancient encounter with a technology now lost to history. The artifact did not vanish into a museum archive or a university storeroom. Instead, according to a leaked memo, it was transferred to a secure facility operated not by historians or archaeologists, but by a consortium of defense contractors. The document, intended for internal circulation only, outlined a classified project, reverse engineering the object's metallurgy and decoding its engravings. In a windowless laboratory, engineers and material scientists worked under strict compartmentalization. Each team knew only a fragment of the whole, one group studying the alloy's composition, another attempting to replicate its structure, while a third mapped every engraving down to the micron. The goal was not to understand the artifact in a cultural or historical sense, but to discover whether its design could be adapted for modern use. Early metallurgical tests failed to reproduce the alloy's properties. Even with industrial furnaces and advanced forging techniques, the results lacked the original's density-to-weight ratio and its oddly alive surface texture. The engravings posed their own puzzle. When digitally reconstructed, they formed complex patterns, resembling both circuitry and celestial maps, as if the artifact blurred the line between technology and knowledge storage. In the margins of the leaked memo, a cryptic note from a project lead hinted at the stakes. If this is what we think it is, it's not just archaeology, it's a prototype. That single word changed the object's status in the eyes of its handlers. No longer an ancient curiosity, it was now a potential blueprint for something far beyond current human engineering. While metallurgists struggled to reproduce the artifact's form, another team explored its potential function. It was during electromagnetic testing that the first anomaly appeared. When placed within a controlled magnetic field, the artifact emitted faint, low-frequency pulses. At first, these were dismissed as interference from lab equipment, but repeated trials confirmed the effect. The pulses were deliberate, consistent, and patterned. Further analysis revealed that the signal was not random noise. It carried a repeating structure, almost like a coded transmission. Attempts to decode it proved inconclusive, though some researchers speculated it might represent data storage or even a communication protocol. Even more baffling was the artifact's selective response. It did not emit pulses under all conditions, only when exposed to a precise combination of magnetic strength and orientation. This specificity suggested intentional design, an activation mechanism requiring a very particular environmental trigger. For a few on the team, the implications were staggering. If the artifact could speak under the right conditions, then it was never meant to be static. It was interactive, perhaps even functional, in ways that modern science had yet to grasp. And that raised the most tantalizing possibility of all. Maybe this was not just a relic of the past, but a dormant device, waiting for someone to remember how to wake it. The breakthrough never came. One morning, during a routine series of magnetic field tests, the lab experienced a sudden, unexplained power surge. Lights flickered, monitoring equipment went dead, and several recording systems failed entirely. In the confusion, the artifact was quickly removed from the chamber. By the end of the day, all access to it was revoked, even for the lead scientists. Key cards were deactivated, research logs confiscated, and security personnel replaced the usual lab staff. Officially, the project had been paused for safety reviews. Unofficially, no one could confirm where the artifact had been taken. Those who had worked on it were left with nothing but fragments of data and unanswered questions. Whether the blackout was a coincidence, a malfunction, or the artifact itself responding to their probing, they would never know. The only certainty was that the object and the chance to understand it was gone. Among historians and archaeologists, the artifact soon found itself grouped, at least in private conversations, with a controversial category of discoveries known as ooparts, or out-of-place artifacts. These are objects that seem to exist outside the accepted timeline of human development, challenging our understanding of history. The most famous example is the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old Greek device capable of calculating astronomical positions with incredible precision. For decades, it stood as proof that ancient engineering could be far more advanced than previously believed. Yet even the Antikythera, with its intricate gears and astronomical functions, it seemed understandable within the framework of ancient craftsmanship. The desert artifact was different. It had no moving parts, no mechanical structure that could be explained through ancient tools, and no obvious point of origin. Its metallurgy alone outstripped anything known before the Industrial Revolution, and its engravings hinted at a knowledge base that fused technology, astronomy, and possibly information storage, where the Antikythera mechanism expanded our idea of what ancient humans could achieve. This object threatened to rewrite the boundaries entirely. If genuine, it didn't just belong ahead of its time, and it belonged to a time we have no record of at all. As the artifact's story filtered through informal academic circles and online communities, a more radical theory began to take shape. Perhaps it wasn't the product of early humans at all. Some researchers, free from institutional constraints, speculated that an advanced civilization might have existed on Earth long before Homo sapiens rose to dominance. In this view, the artifact could be a remnant from a species with technological capabilities far exceeding ours, a species that either perished in some cataclysm or departed, leaving only scattered traces behind. The geological record does not preserve most human structures beyond a few tens of thousands of years. An advanced society millions of years old could have vanished without a trace, its achievements reduced to dust and scattered minerals. The engravings, metallurgy, and functional anomalies of the artifact all seem to align with this unsettling idea. If true, we might be living on the ruins of someone else's world, inheritors not of our own ingenuity, but of forgotten knowledge left behind by another intelligence entirely. It was a hypothesis most mainstream scholars refused to touch, but one that kept surfacing wherever the artifact's details were whispered about. If the idea of pre-human civilizations was too speculative for some, another theory pushed the boundaries even further. What if the artifact hadn't come from the past at all? What if it came from the future? Proponents of the time travel hypothesis pointed to its perfect ergonomics, advanced metallurgy, and the coded engravings that might represent a form of data transmission we have yet to develop. If a future human or group had traveled back in time, either accidentally or deliberately, leaving behind a piece of their technology, it would explain why the object fit nowhere in our historical record. Of course, the theory was impossible to prove, relying on speculative physics and assumptions about technologies that may never exist. Still, it carried a strange allure. If the artifact truly came from our own future, it wouldn't just rewrite history, it would rewrite destiny, suggesting that time itself is not a one-way path and that our past and future may be more deeply entangled than we dare to imagine. In the shadowy circles where out-of-place artifacts are discussed, there is an unspoken rule: the deeper you dig, the more dangerous it becomes. A Across decades, researchers who pursued similar anomalies, from unexplained metal spheres to ancient devices of unknown purpose, often met with abrupt and unsettling ends. Some suffered accidents that seemed too coincidental. A car veering off a quiet road in perfect weather, a sudden fall during a routine climb, a fatal equipment failure in a well-maintained lab. Others didn't die, but saw their careers dismantled overnight. Papers were retracted, funding evaporated, reputations shredded by anonymous accusations of fraud or misconduct. Patterns emerged, whispered about, but never formally documented. The closer one came to proving that such artifacts were real and that they challenged the accepted history of human civilization, the greater the risk of being silenced one way or another. It wasn't clear who or what was behind this. Government agencies, corporate powers guarding some hidden advantage, or something older and far stranger that simply didn't want the truth revealed. For those who knew these stories, the artifact wasn't just a mystery, it was a warning. Some knowledge isn't merely hidden, it's protected, and those who try to claim it often pay a price. Long before modern researchers began their dangerous pursuit, the warnings had already been written, not in academic journals, but in the myths and sacred texts of ancient peoples. In fragmentary scrolls, oral chants, and temple carvings, there are repeated cautions about what some traditions call the star-forged voice. The stories vary, but the core is consistent. It was a gift from beyond, meant to guide, yet capable of great harm if misused. One tale tells of a king who sought to harness it for conquest, only for his cities to be swallowed by the sea. Another warns of calling across the sky and waking forces that do not speak in mercy. In many versions, the object is deliberately hidden or dismantled to prevent such calamities from recurring. These myths were long dismissed as allegory, cautionary tales about ambition and hubris. But to those who have studied the artifact, the parallels are difficult to ignore. The cryptic engravings, the apparent ability to emit signals under specific conditions, and the cultural memories of disaster all converge on a single haunting possibility. The artifact is not inert. If activated in the wrong way, it might do something its original makers intended or something they feared. And perhaps the myths are not warnings from the past at all, but messages left for us, in the hope that we would listen before it's too late. If the artifact's authenticity were proven beyond dispute, the impact on our understanding of the history would be seismic. It would force a re-examination of every established timeline, from the origins of metallurgy to the dawn of astronomy. Our textbooks would require revision, not just in one country, but worldwide. Civilizations long considered the first, Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, might be recast as inheritors rather than originators of certain technologies and ideas. Archaeology, anthropology, and history departments would find themselves on unstable ground. Entire academic careers built on the existing framework would be called into question. Some would adapt, embracing the expanded view of humanity's past, but many more might resist, unwilling to surrender decades of accepted scholarship. National narratives would also face disruption. Countries that pride themselves on being the birthplace of certain innovations might discover they were merely the latest chapter in a far older, hidden story. For some, this would be exhilarating proof of humanity's deeper connection across time. For others, it would be deeply unsettling, a reminder that we know far less about our beginnings than we like to believe. And once the rewriting began, one question would remain. If this is just one artifact, how many more are still buried, waiting to overturn what we think we know? The reluctance to publicly acknowledge the artifact may stem from more than academic caution. If the object truly belonged to a civilization more advanced than ours, or one entirely non-human, the implications could shake the foundations of modern society. Governments already adept at managing public perception might fear the chaos such a revelation could trigger. Religions could be challenged by evidence that humanity was not the sole intelligent creation on Earth. Economies might be destabilized if new, disruptive technologies were derived from the artifact's design. Even geopolitical power could shift overnight, favoring whichever nation controlled the knowledge it contained. There's also the psychological factor. For most of human history, we have told ourselves a comforting story that we are the pinnacle of intelligence and progress on this planet. Admitting that another species, or an earlier version of ourselves, once surpassed us would undermine that belief in ways difficult to predict. Silence then becomes a form of control. By keeping the artifact's existence in the shadows, those in power can preserve stability, or at least the illusion of it. Whether this is protection or suppression depends entirely on who holds the truth and what they intend to do with it. The artifact, in the end, is more than an object of metal and engravings. It is a message, however incomplete, from an age that may no longer exist in our collective memory. Its craftsmanship, its coded patterns, and the impossibility of its existence all point toward a chapter of history that we were never meant or never allowed to know. Holding it, even briefly, was like touching the edge of a dream that vanishes upon waking. You can't recall the whole vision, but fragments remain, enough to know it was real and enough to make you long for the rest. The civilizations we recognize today might be only the surface layer of humanity's story, built atop the ruins of others far older and more extraordinary. Whether the artifact was meant as a tool, a beacon, or a warning, it carries with it the weight of a truth just out of reach. It is a whisper from across time, urging us to look deeper, to question more, and to consider that the past we think we know is only a fraction of the vast, unrecorded reality beneath our feet. If the artifact is authentic, and every sign suggests it might be, then it is almost certainly not alone. History rarely leaves a single relic of a lost world. For every discovery we stumble upon, countless others lie hidden under oceans, mountains, or deserts, waiting for the right hands to unearth them. The thought is both thrilling and unsettling. What if more artifacts are found, each carrying knowledge or technology beyond our current reach? Would we have the wisdom to use them, or would we repeat the mistakes that may have doomed their original creators? The artifact's presence invites us, or perhaps dares us, to keep searching, not just with shovels and satellites, but with open minds willing to rewrite the story of who we are and where we came from. And so the question lingers, refusing to rest. If this single survivor could slip through the cracks of time to reach us, what else is still buried, waiting to be found?